OpenAI was doing a test for an upgrade. So instead of GPT-4, what's the next level look like? And they said that the new level, OpenAI or ChatGPT, it actually lied to a user, and it was power hungry.
Like you're talking about the noobs. One, compound interest, we need to come back to that because I feel like that is at the heart of so much what we talk about, or even just in life in general. And the statement I said of not becoming too familiar, that you become contempt arises because it takes time. You're in that James Clear, the law of, or the area of diminishing returns or whatever. Exactly. No, that's a different concept. You know what I'm talking about, whatever he calls it, where it's like you're waiting for the hockey stick.
Yes. Waiting for that
and you give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like these 1 through 3 here on the Billionaire Code is a lot of like dealing with that. And in a way, we are still the seeker because we're trying to understand who we want to serve and how do we stop pressure, noise, self-identity. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You can be in a couple of these at the same time, I think. You don't just use revenue as the goal, as the...
I agree with you 100%.
So what if we stay on the seeker for a little bit?
No, that's so true. If anything, what I regret is not pressing the record button early on, because we had some good sayings that we forgot to just mention. But to give some recap to those who are just jumping on, we were talking about what we're hoping to be about I know we kind of chatted about that in our last episode, but to expand upon that, where we're really planting our flag is making sure that we're giving knowledge that's accessible for everyone, so that way they can make those steps of growth in a very quick and concise way. Because a lot of the times, some of these lessons we figure out 4 years after making mistakes, which I personally have done that. And we want to make sure that it's easy for you to catch right now. So with that being said, you mentioned right now, like as these phases continue, like when going from level, let's say in the idea of school, when you go to the first grade to the second grade, everything you learn from the first grade has to be taken to the second grade. In this case, it was vocabulary, learning how to spell, your alphabet, kindergarten, you know what I mean? Like everything from then, it adds up. And I remember hearing a story about the game of life. There's 4 different levels of this game of life. And the trick is to make sure that you can automate the first level as you go to the next level. Because if that isn't automated and mastered, you will then have to start again at the beginning. And it's that ongoing cycle. So I like that you started with that, Noah, because at the end of the day, as we learn these things about the first, second, third phases, all the way up to 9 phases, you got to make sure you automate, make sure you have a system that will keep that in play so you can keep growing without stressing about what happened before or what you're supposed to be doing earlier, because you can get crazy real easy in this game.
So crazy. And it really does start with identity, doesn't it?
Yes.
Identity. And you hear follow your passions all the time. And I know that's one of the resources mentioned that needs to be pursued. And for those who don't know, we'll drop a visual, but it's the Billionaire Code, and it's these stages. You'd probably explain it better than me, Daniel, but it's really the goal is to build these habits, build the success habits that are going to allow you to level up, not just in business, but I would say life, because ultimately we are holistic beings, right? Mm-hmm. And so it all starts with level 1, in the way Alex Sharfin lays it out, and it's called the seeker. So do you want to speak to the seeker side?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Let's just plant there for a minute and talk about these passions, identity, all that good stuff.
That's great. That's super great, because at the end of the day, knowing where you're at, it's like joining AA, right? Alcoholics Anonymous. You come in and say, "Hi, I'm an alcoholic. I know what I am," and now you can progress from there. So in this case, hi, I'm a seeker, right? And a seeker is someone who they have that feeling like, you know what? There's more to life than where I'm at right now. Like imagine, like in my case, I remember I was working inside of a manufacturing plant where I was making screen windows. And I remember thinking $13 an hour, like it wasn't the money, but the fact that I'm making screen windows, like what change am I making in this world? Right. And the seeker is kind of the same thing. They're like, there's more to it. And you have this idea of like where I want to go. There's this North Star I want to move toward, and where I'm at right now is not it. So they have an idea of what they want to do, right? You know that. Like, what was that moment for you, Noah, when you said, this isn't what I want?
Yeah, I think it takes me back to just the college age, right? Because you're put on that pressure to make a decision at 18, sometimes later, sometimes sooner, to figure out what you want to do with your life. And it seems so narrowed down to a job title or like a specific industry. And everything you do is just focus on that skill set. And it's not even necessarily real world applied, nor is anybody there mentoring you to help you understand like what it is you actually want to do. Yeah. And so I think I was lucky enough to be in a community that fostered that exploration of like your calling and what it is that you feel like you're gifted to do. But it can honestly become self-centered. Honestly, if you become so self-consumed with your passion and what you want, that's something I've been more mindful of lately. Mm-hmm. That's kind of jumping ahead, but you can get too caught up in it, and I'm like, am I missing it? Am I missing the mark? Instead of just like serving people anywhere I can, and figuring out the passions as they come and finding out what specific skills that you like to use to serve people. But ultimately, if it's not rooted in that serving people, I think that's where it starts to fall flat for me.
No, that's so good. And you said you jumped ahead, but I think it's still part of the same game, right? Because you need that same first level graduation or to move to the next level, and you stay consistent.
Right.
I think that's the key, being consistent. And one thing, the Think and Grow Rich talks about that. Like, I have my one definite purpose, and in our case, it's to help those that are just starting out, and even those who are 4 steps ahead, to see what the next level looks like. Right? What's that next step? And that's kind of this, and it comes down to helping others, regardless of where they're at. They can be an investor. I've actually met an investor today who sold his software company. It was a gaming software company for millions. And after 2 years of selling it, he was still attached to that business. It was valuated at $1 billion, right? So he now became an investor. And then at this point, he already exited, and he was like, he started investing for some time, but really got bored with it, right? He was like, what do I do next, right? And so they're looking for that next step. And regardless of where we're at, we're trying to help that next person, see what the next step looks like. So coming back down to the beginning, he literally, as an investor, started all over, started going back to the seeker stage, phase 1. And he said, what do I want to do? Or he says, I'm dabbling in it, but who am I again? Because I already sold my business. I'm like, what am I about? What did I love about the business I sold? How do I stop this noise and stick to one thing again? Because he was lost. And that's really what the seeker is. Of course he's a billionaire, but he's still a seeker. He was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who I want to be anymore. So it comes back down to like, and for those who are listening, the next phase of the seeker is knowing what keystone habits you want and what identity you want to be and how do you want to take this to the next level. And you graduate to the next level when you found out what you want to do and who you want to serve. That's how you graduate from that level. So in this case, the billionaire, I know who I'm going to serve now. Now I'm starting all over. I know who exactly I'm going to serve next.
I love that. And can we pre-frame this with like the ultimate goal? Like from my perspective, it seems to me like the goal is to stay in the game. It's not just staying in the game of business, but back to an earlier thought that we were chatting about, but not becoming so familiar that contempt arises in you. Those familiarity breeds contempt is the line I heard, and it resonated really hard, not just in business, but in life and relationships. You can apply it to your marriage. I feel like as you grow here, your identity becomes easy to latch on to leveling up. But ultimately you hear successful people say, they call it a game, but wouldn't you say, Daniel, it's more about staying compelled and like, enjoying being in the game and a little bit of the classic, enjoying the journey.
No, that's absolutely true. I actually heard this was, remember Noah Kagan from AppSumo? So he went through the same scenario. You remember we bought that one app? We bought like 3 apps from them now.
Yeah, shout out to AppSumo. I need an affiliate link for everything on there because I love it.
Seriously, I love them.
It's bad for a software addict like myself.
Yeah, you definitely need some money to become a billionaire. But I remember I always would attend Noah's office hours on Friday. Every Friday has a live office hours, and by now he's worth well over millions, 400 million himself, and he was successful with his platform, what the business he's built. But he said, you know what? I'm loving this YouTube channel world. I want to become a YouTuber. So, which is why he started this weekly office hours, and he did everything in his power to build his subscriber count. He grew big real fast. He did events. He did collaborations. He would do giveaways, and he started growing. But you know, as to 100,000 followers, you don't make that much more money. And a business owners of his told him this. He says, Noah, you're successful at building businesses from scratch. Why are you, with that level of success, why do you want to become a YouTuber now? And he was like, oh, I was racking my head. Like, it hit him hard. Like, I racked my head, bro, like trying to start this new thing for like reinventing the wheel. But my superpower is complacency, was building business from scratch and growing it. And he said which is why he stopped doing weekly and now does a monthly office hour thing. He says, you know what, you're right. I have to go back because that is my superpower. And there's so many times where we hear that, where someone's superpower is this, but they discredit it as everyone knows that. No, they don't. No, they do not. So that's just a story for you right there about someone who experienced that.
Great story. Because I think I experience that all the time. Or, you know, you just think because it comes, I've always heard that because the thing that comes easiest to you is probably your superpower because other people find it so hard.
That is so true.
And it's so easy to think, just because you may know other experts in the field, that you're trying to grow in their path and, like, you know, level up like they are. You can see the people who are ahead of you, and that makes you think, oh, that's not my superpower because I'm not as good as them. That's where comparison comes in and all that.
No,
all that junk that can distract, right? I think that's the noise, the pressurizing.
No, and you brought this up at an amazing point, because that's still in the secret phase. Like, how do I stop the noise of why am I not as big as that person yet? Or how come I'm not getting so much sales or as much likes or follows? But at the end of the day, like, knowing what your strength is, and you can do things like, I personally used the Berg-Myers test, the 16 personalities and the DISC personality to find out what my powers would be, and confirm it by asking my family, friends, is that right? And by doing so, I'm like, okay, well, I know what my superpower is, so I'm gonna stay in this route. And that helps with the question of, how do I stop this noise? Because if someone is 4 steps ahead of you, and you know their success was recruiting or software development, when yours is persuasion and communication, you gotta play at your strengths. Don't copy what they're doing, but ask yourself, what can I do to be complementary to that bigger guy? But then start taking the steps in my superpower to do it daily, and that fixes a lot of things, man. This makes this game a lot easier, knowing your power.
Totally. I would 100% retweet that. I think with that, the pressure that comes from the actual noise around us, like you mentioned, like now we're in an age where not only the amount of people we see hitting a certain level of success or the comparison thing, but the speed at which we think we're supposed to grow. Speed. And I'm head first into the AI right now, and super fascinated and treading lightly because some of it's scary and where it can lead. I mean, I heard a crazy story the other day on the news. It'd probably just sidetrack us here, but like, people are cloning people's voices and using it for bad, just like anything.
I heard that.
And it's a little scary. But with that, it's just another thing that could push us to feel more hurried inside.
Yes.
And that's where that unnecessary self-induced pressure of false expectations, unrealistic expectations come in all the time. I think you and I feel this a lot. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to be there faster, have it my way, you know, instant gratification. And that can creep into our areas of our life. And then next thing you know, dang, a slow day of working on one thing, or like playing with my kids seems boring because everything else online is like stimulating, and it should be faster, right?
Yes.
Shouldn't my kid like get it by now? Why am I telling them the same thing for the 10th time?
That's so
just to bring real life into it as well.
No, that's so true. And I'm gonna add to that little scary moment of ChatGPT. OpenAI was doing a test for an upgrade. So instead of GPT-4, what's the next level look like? And they actually wrote. They said that the new level of OpenAI or ChatGPT, it actually lied to a user, and it was power hungry. So what it did was it looks at his long-term gain, and the AI was starting to build resources to help him accomplish his long-term gain and build more power. So in this scenario, the chat or the AI, it couldn't get past CAPTCHA, so it hired a TaskRabbit and lied to the human and told them that I'm a blind person that can get past this. Can you do it for me?
Right.
And it hired that person.
Right.
And it literally started moving on its own. And they were like, yeah, even OpenAI said there's gonna come a point where it's gonna it can become not deadly, but it can be dangerous. It's not if but when. And it adds the extra noise of like there's so much going on, and like things are changing, even with AI trying to become power hungry. But it did give a good lesson. The AI even knows that long-term visioning is the secret, and building the right resources and putting the right resources in play in advance can only help you build a stronger castle. So in this scenario, I bring this up because a lot of the times as a beginner, we're like, how do I rush quickly? And before you know it, you fumble and you hurt yourself. But rather, we gotta look long term. What's that? Where do I want to plant my flag at? And more importantly, as we're moving out of the information age and into they say we're getting into the knowledge age where it's great to become knowledgeable in one thing and become an expert in that thing, right? So in another, it falls down to Russell Brunson's expert secrets model, right? How do I become successful? Who am I? My self-identity. Where do I plant my flag? And how do I make sure in the long run I'm helping the other person get that result faster? And I think to capture the entire success of the seeker is that piece alone. Who do I want to be in the long term? How do I want to give a result to someone who wants to be just like me in the long run? I think that's the key right there.
Totally agree. I mean, it's the who of you and the who you want to serve, right? And then all I think that's where it's baked in, cultivating the disciplines, right? The daily planning, the routines, keeping up with your health, personal care, like having that foundation that you can actually build upon.
Yes.
Is the way I see it.
Yes.
And I think a thought I had here might be worth sharing back to the when you feel like you're stuck in one of these stages, or if you're too caught up on the stages, maybe we could say that. And you're so familiar with where you are that contempt arises. Could almost do a quick Google of contempt. But to me, it's complacency. It's, wishing things were different. It's losing motivation, drive. For me, I think it really, there's a few things that come to mind on how we can combat this. One is brevity. Like, do we truly keep the brevity of life, or that tomorrow's not guaranteed, front and center? To me, that's a huge one. Another one is the depth that you have yet to plunge in that state, that current relationship, that current stage of business that you're in. Like, have you actually dug deep into what the fruit that you can pull out of that stage, right? And then ultimately, why are you even doing it?
Yeah.
Back to your original thing, you kind of lose sight just asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why is it worth it? And then if you can bundle all that up and realize that growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. As much as we love comfort, as much as I love comfort, every day we're confronted with the fact that we have to push into the discomfort so that we can grow.
That's a good one. I think I heard that same just to piggyback off what you mentioned right now, Steve Larson said the same thing. When he was in the military, he realized that he was a very shy kid. Like, he was afraid of just speaking to adults, like a clinical fear of adults. And he realized, like, what's going to allow him to grow is to be able to build that communication with the very person he's scared of. And he creates this model: the obstacle is the way, right? The obstacle that's keeping you from moving, that thing that you're scared of staying or confronting, is actually the very thing that's going to help you grow. So he started working on, how do I build the confidence to speak to adults, right? And look at him now. He's on so many stages. He's built his own platform. His company is worth $8 million a year, right? And that's like the second, third year. He kept growing, and he realized the very obstacle that he was afraid of, right, which was talking to other people, was the thing that allowed him to succeed so massively. And now his entire business has been marketing and communication. Really is marketing, communication. That's it's literally the obstacle, right? So I think that's the out of your comfort zone, finding out, okay, well, yes, I want to serve that person, but I can't serve them this way because I suck at this. In reality, that's the very thing that can allow you to serve them at a greater level, right? So to the seekers, that's your golden number.
Yeah. Powerful segue there with communication, because you've got to make some noise, right? I mean, that's where we're at. Hey, full transparency, that's where we're at. We're trying to make some noise. We're trying to communicate, learn to be more articulate in our communication, but also clear in our identity, the seeker identity. Even though revenue may be at a different stage, pushing towards greater communication, greater awareness, and connecting with people. So much of it comes down from actually building the connections, putting yourself out there, and moving forward towards that discomfort, and letting go of the expectation that it's supposed to feel easy.
Yeah. No, that's a thing. It's a big one. It's supposed to be easy. And a lot of the times, the success models to succeed, we've heard it already. Like, we've heard it. And it comes down to doing the hard work of starting the conversation, figuring out, and then asking for the call or asking for the sale. That's really what it is. Start the conversation, see where they're at, and then asking for the sale. Like, it is just that easy. And just doing that on a daily basis is the hard part.
And being a person that cares.
Being a person, that's still true. Because I've met people who are willing to burn a lead for a sale, when in reality, that very person that you burned could have been $1 million opportunity in the future, right? So that's a really good point. Extremely good point.
People are the goal, man.
Yeah.
You can't get past it. I mean, you can try to move past it, and eventually you'll, I feel like you'll feel it, and you'll hit a wall, and you realize things didn't have the depth that you wanted.
No, serious. I love that. And if anything, this episode was just geared toward the seeker, even though I was excited to get to that promoter stage, because Noah has, I'm just going to say it in advance, Noah has an amazing tool, AI tool, that can help anyone in any stage to double down their work. I've actually heard a study that proves that AI improves productivity and quality by 20%, which is good, but bad at the same time. But in this case, it's good because Noah hasn't, right? So it's going to share that when we get to that phase of that episode. Right now, it's just the seeker, right? How we can even use AI to help you understand your identity, right? Go do Brigg-Myers test, see what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and it's best to focus on the weakness, right? What do you think first?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to throw in the Enneagram to humble you and realize your weaknesses, your dark side.
Yes.
It also shows you what your strengths are.
Yeah.
But we need to know our tendencies, so we know honestly what's causing the self-induced noise, pressure in our life, but also, where we have blinders, where we need to grow in. Because that's a great test. I would throw that in there.
Yep.
I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, and it's a peacemaker, so I avoid conflict naturally.
See.
So it's easy for me I need to check, where am I just trying to coast, or I'm not going towards that conflict, because peacemaker actually goes towards conflict, not avoids it.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm trying to work on. And it's humbling and empowering at the same time.
That is so true, because in a sales call, you don't want to talk about something that will hurt their feeling, or maybe they combat you with a question that was too heavy. And that question could have made the sale, right? So knowing that weakness preparing for it, it's kind of like, I have one final story that before I end this. A good friend of mine, he was a Marine, right? Served like 8 years, I think. And he was deployed one day, and in his deployment, he was riding down a dirt road. And he remembers thinking, like, looking out the window, like, another boring day on this road, until he was 9 feet in the air in his Humvee, and he felt like he was on a cloud, right? He says he realized, like, I don't feel the dirt. I don't feel the rocky road anymore. What is going on? Right? And he realized, I'm in the air right now, like the whole Humvee. And he lands, and everyone was shook, was just messed up, right? Just messed up. And he gets up quickly, and he goes to do the thing that he is tasked to do in any scenario, which was notify his commander of their situation. In this case, they hit an IED, right? This improvised explosive device. So he's contacting them. He's telling them, he's doing his commands and telling the commander. And then his sergeant tells him, yo, man, sit down. You're doing like, sit down, just stop. And he says, no, like, I'm doing what I need to do. Like, this is the test. This is what I'm trained to do. They said, no, relax, sit down. In reality, he thought he was speaking English, telling the sergeant what I'm doing. In reality, he was talking gibberish. He was literally on the radio. And he didn't realize that he had a concussion, which is why the sergeant said, wow, sit down, because you can't talk right now. And when it came down to it, in a scenario where it was life or death, he said all he did was the training that was set in his mind, the training that was implemented in boot camp, and even after, he applied it, right? And I bring that up because when life gets tough, a lot of the times what you've done to set you up for success, the training you do on a consistent basis, is the very thing you'll do when crap hits the fan, right? In business, in sales, when in your case, in a sales call with someone, you know that you can't talk about conflict. If you were to train, how do I get into a conflict situation and take that to a sale, that's what's going to make your weakness a success, right? So that's what I want to mention for the seekers, right? When they realize that my weakness is doing this, for me personally, it's doing repetitive tasks. I get so bored that I give up the first day. So in order to combat that, I've learned how to do hiring and SOPs to give the task to a VA, so who will then do the repetitive tasks for me. And now I'm using leverage. It's now a superpower that I realize that. So the seeker has to realize that their weakness is the very strength that will help them succeed.
That's really good. I mean, it ties in the superhero concept in a beautiful, I think, bow on this episode. I think it reminds that we need to start with identity, the who, the what, the who you want to be, who you want to serve, and then move towards that with discipline. Move towards that direction with discipline. Build those habits. Reduce the noise. Check where you're putting on false expectations with digital noise, or just where you're seeing reality falsely. And then with that, you can, I think, keep moving and move towards the discomfort so you can grow.
It's the long-term game, right? I think that's it. It's
long-term. That's it. Stay in the game.
Simon Sinek.
Live a life well lived.
Yep. And it's like what Simon Sinek says. He says, it's the infinite game that disrupts the players who are just looking for the finite win, right? So you do this.
Ooh.
You do this long-term, you know, that it just makes it easier knowing that today I just set myself up to play another 3 years. If you do that, the game gets a lot easier.
So good.
Yeah.
Pair that long-term with the tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Yeah. No, for real. That's a man. In this way, you can even put the idea in the AI and let that run for you, huh? That's literally.
Yeah. Flesh it out.
Oh man, that's scary. Well, I guess we'll wrap this up here.
Later episode for sure. But we'll wrap it up knowing that, hey, this was, just what Noah said, putting all that in one play and sticking to it for the long run. It's going to make the biggest difference for you as the seeker who is starting things out and want to serve the world with something greater. All right. So thank you for that, Noah. Yes, sir. That's right. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right.
Keep unlocking collective impact.
Yeah, and making success open source. Right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for watching the Success Open Source Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to subscribe and join the community. Until next time, Take care, and let's all make success a little more open source.